Howdy, folks. We're continuing our Unit 3 look into this idea of synthesis and reasoning. Looking at a bunch of different ideas, pulling them apart, putting them back together into a new and logical progression to develop our own thoughts. So specifically today, we're going to look at identifying and avoiding some logical fallacies in writing and thinking about how we can use arguments or weaknesses in other people's thoughts and ideas to criticize and create our own ideas. Okay, so a lot of times you've probably noticed throughout the world is that when people are having discussion about a concept, there's some discord, there's some disagreement that is definitely going on in different parts of the world today. And that's fine, right? Joining ideas and putting people in dialogue doesn't always have to be like this harmonious, perfect thing, right? Or we're coming together in unity. Actually, through complication and through argument, that's where we really start to find, okay, where are the areas that we really need to focus on? Right? Because it's not a perfect idea where if we say, author X or author 1 argues this and author 2 argues this, so this plus this equals this new idea, perfect. Sometimes it might look a little bit more like this, where if we've got one author arguing that X equals Y, I like these algebra terms, but another author equals, well, X equals Z, actually, these two authors can still be put into conversation, right? And it's important that they enter into conversation. So you as a third party, you as a person who's been tasked with synthesizing their ideas, can look and start to find out, what's going on below the surface. Why is this person looking at X and coming up with this idea? But why is this person looking at X and coming up with this idea? Because that can direct where our conversation is breaking down. Right? We can look at their perspective. We can look at the data and the way they're looking at their data, and consider their rhetorical situation. Who are they as a writer? Who are they as what audience are they speaking to? What's the context in which they're creating this? Because those factors might severely contribute to the conversation at hand. And that might be a better way to address this situation by looking at where and why we are coming up with different ideas. And so when you're creating your synthesis, it doesn't have to be, author A plus B equals author C. Sometimes it might look like this. So if our thesis is, okay, A is better than B, right? This thing is good and this thing is bad, right? I might be looking at some documents saying A is good, B is bad, right? And I'm going to use those documents, use those authors to support my idea of this. But a more nuanced approach, a more synthetic approach in terms of like an idea of actually being synthesized would be taking a look at an author like this. So saying, okay, yep, author A agrees with my thesis, support 1 agrees with my thesis, support 2 agrees with my thesis, support 3 is arguing against my thesis, like they're arguing for B, but I can say that they are narrow, they are limited, and here's where some of their ideas might be right, but here's where some of these ideas might be wrong, and I can use that to create a line of logic to prove that while B might have its good qualities, A is superior. Okay. So we have to be able to address these weaknesses in other people's arguments, find their limitations, find where they might be making mistakes, for 2 reasons. One, helps us be skeptical of ideas and concepts, which I definitely want you to be. It helps us with our own criticism and analysis of other people's thoughts. And then probably most importantly is if we can recognize other people's logical flaws, we can address them in our own writing and try to avoid them. So we're going to be looking at logical fallacies to give us ideas. How do we synthesize? How do we analyze different pieces and parts of folks' arguments? So here they are. There's quite a few of them, so stick with me. First, we're going to talk about this idea of fallacies of relevance, where I'm arguing something and I present a line of logic or an example that seems good, but is just not relevant to what we're arguing. I see this all the time in student papers where a student will write me this beautiful thesis and this beautiful body paragraph, but they don't actually connect to each other. So that's what we're talking about in terms of relevance. There's 3 specific terms here that we'll talk about. First one is a red herring. It's when a speaker skips to a new irrelevant topic in order to avoid the topic of discussion. Like, oh, I don't want to talk about that, so I'm going to talk about this instead and present it like I'm trying to answer the question that you gave to me. Watch any political debate, and 50% of what they say are going to be red herrings, where moderator asks like a presidential or a Senate candidate a question and they go off on this other tangent. It has nothing to do with the question. That would be an example of a red herring. In 2016, there was, if you remember, if you were old enough, one of the presidential candidates, Hillary Clinton, had used a personal email address, incorrectly so, right? This was a big deal. For like her position in the State Department. She was the Secretary of State. And she's a personal email address instead of like the private, secure governmental one. That's a big deal, right? That's an issue. But does the fact that she used her own personal email, which was wrong, affect her choices on healthcare or taxation? No. You can't present this false idea. It would be an irrelevant argument to bring up her emails when we're talking about some other topic. Another common one that you'll find in politics is this idea of ad hominem, which means to the man. I'm attacking a person, not necessarily the idea. And sometimes the character of a person does matter, right? If we're talking about, a court case that has a single witness, someone who witnessed a crime, the character of that one person matters. Because if that person is like a known felon, a known con artist, that needs to be brought up because the jury should know, like, hey, this dude has been to prison. This dude has manipulated people time and time again. Probably not the most trustworthy witness. But for an extreme example of when this wouldn't apply is like we're trying to argue about what pizza toppings we should order. And my friend calls me out like, dude, you cheated on a test in 7th grade. You should have no say in pizza. I'm like, hold on. Number one, I didn't cheat on a test in 7th grade. Good gracious. I'm a good student. And 2, that has no relevance to the topic at hand. Another political example, you may love or hate the character of Donald Trump, but that does not matter whether you like his character or not in terms of some of his policy decisions. His policy decisions, again, on like healthcare or taxation or foreign policy, who he is as a person doesn't really affect like the laws that are being in place. So make sure you're attacking the thing that needs to be attacked. And last idea of relevance is a faulty analogy. Analogies are wonderful things to build connection and illustrate ideas. You can build appeals to emotion with analogies and logic with analogies. But we just have to make sure the analogies that we choose are consistent and relevant to what we're talking about. For example, you wouldn't let your child smoke. So why would you let them eat meat? Both cause cancer. Well, yes, but that is an irrelevant or like gross simplification of this idea. Eating meat, like, yes, red meat, if you overeat, it's going to cause cancer. Smoking definitely cause cancer, right? But these are not synonymous. You don't sit down to eat lunch and have a cigarette and then leave, right? Meat has a lot of other qualities that are important to a human being. Smoking, not so much, right? So I cannot make a one-to-one comparison here. So it would be a faulty analogy. All right. Next, we have fallacies of accuracy. Biggest one here that you probably want to pay attention to is this idea of a straw man argument. And that's when a speaker chooses deliberately to oversimplify someone's argument. It just in order to ridicule it or basically to give them something easier to attack. Because if I'm here making an argument, and then instead of like attacking my argument, my full argument, my co-arguer, however you want to think about it, the person criticizing me, builds this straw man, this fake idea that is much simpler and much easier to argue against, to kind of make their point, to rile people up. Here's a gross simplification of an argument. So a while back, a couple years ago, Starbucks decided that they weren't just going to celebrate Christmas on their cups, right? And so I think they took off some Christmas trees or something like that, and they had for a couple years. They maybe still do. I don't go to Starbucks. Like these red cups, and there was like the holiday cup, the winter cup. You get a nice bright red cup, and then some people got ridiculously up in arms about this, thinking like, man, Starbucks is just trying to cancel Christmas. And it won't stop until everyone in this country is an atheist. Man, they hate Christianity. Like, whoa, slow down. Like wanting to create a coffee cup that's not like solely representing the religious influence of one group of people is very, very, very different than wanting a religion to fail. So this would be creating a straw man argument, an oversimplified view of what is actually happening. And another fallacy of accuracy would be a false dilemma, when a speaker or an author basically boils it down to just two extreme choices that they're saying that their audience needs to pick from. So for example, you either choose love or you choose hate. And I'm going to say that there's probably a few steps in between love and hate, right? Indifference, maybe I just like something, maybe it slightly annoys me, but I don't hate it. This is not a binary option. So if someone does present to you a binary option saying you got to do this or you got to do this, you should think, well, are those the only roads available? Don't fall into a false dilemma. All right, we've got fallacies of insufficiency next. When someone presents an idea but doesn't look at enough evidence or doesn't provide enough evidence to accurately present it. So there's this idea of a hasty generalization. Well, it looks like I didn't update the definition, but what this one actually means is I'm going to draw a conclusion from insufficient evidence. I'm going to look at one perspective and then automatically base my larger worldview or my larger thesis on that one idea. So for example, smoking isn't bad for you. My great aunt smoked a pack a day and lived to be 90. She could do it. Anybody can do it. Well, that's an insufficient sample size, right? One person may not be affected by cancer. If 3 out of 10 people aren't affected by smoking and cancer, I don't know what the actual rates are, and you pick one of those 3 people that wasn't affected, well, there's 7 other people who are affected, right? We have to look at a broader picture in order to make an argument. And this is where we have to be careful with anecdotal evidence. Just by telling me one story doesn't necessarily prove your point. Now, it can be effective in appealing to me emotionally. It can even be a great logical appeal, so long as that's not the only thing that you're using to back up your idea. Have to pull in more information rather than just one viewpoint, one example. And the last fallacy of insufficiency is this concept of circular reasoning. So using the claim itself to provide evidence for that claim. For example, you can't give me an A, or can't give me a C, I'm an A student, right? And that means if I'm an A student, everything that I do, I get an A on. Well, that's not actually how it works, right? Like you're an A student because you do A work and turn in A quality assignments. That would be the logical line of reasoning. You don't just get an A because you're an A student. Okay, so what are the big takeaways? So number one, think about using disagreement and criticism of arguments as a way to still enhance your synthesis. Just because something doesn't argue what you're trying to argue doesn't mean that you can't take some of their ideas, pull them into your own, and use a criticism of their idea to further emphasize your point. And then we also took a look at these 3 different types of fallacies. So fallacies of relevance. We got to make sure that everything we're bringing up is directly related and tied to our thesis and our overall point. Fallacies of accuracy. We've got to make sure that the analogies that we use, the evidence that we use are accurate and truthful. And then the last one was fallacies of insufficiency. We've got to make sure that we provide enough evidence, not just looking at anecdotal evidence or circular reasoning to prove what we're trying to prove. All right. Good luck, folks.